the whole dynamic changes when you put the focus on the consumer of the product, whether it's healthcare or education, right? When you focus on kids and parents, all education is going to get better, all of it, whether it's public, private, it's all going to get better because they have to focus on delivering a product that the consumer likes. And the same thing is true with healthcare, right? I mean, and it's true within a VA system or outside. If you just have, look at Medicare. Now, since Medicare Advantage has come along, I think, Medicare has to be better because it's competing with Medicare Advantage. So I think that's really the key here is we want the veteran to have that option and that opportunity to make the choice that is best for them. And you know better than me, so many veterans love the VA system, and that's great. Nobody wants to take that away from them. But boy, there are lots of veterans who would love to just go get community care.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of American Potential. As 2024 is wrapping up, we wanted to take time and reflect over the past year for our last few episodes of the year. And in the previous episode, we talked to Kent Strang from Americans for Prosperity about what they've worked on this past year. And then our next episode will be the whole podcast team back together. That's a fun one. I'm sure you won't want to miss that. Today, we're going to focus on Concerned Veterans for America and see what they've been doing. Well, this year was the 10th anniversary of the Phoenix VA scandal, which is where it was discovered that the VA had a secret wait list, which resulted in veterans dying while waiting for care. And out of that tragedy, the Mission Act was passed, which gives veterans the option to access community care if a VA facility is too far away or if there's a long wait time. Well, today's guest is Jason Beardsley. Jason's been on the show before. He's the Senior Coalitions Advisor for Concerned Veterans for America, and he's Director of Veterans Initiatives at Stand Together. He's also a veteran of the United States Army and the United States Navy. Jason, thanks for being with us.
Hey, great to be with you. Thank you, as always, for having me on the show. Excited to talk about some of CVA's priorities and concerns, and really looking forward to the new year, too. So,
yeah, now you're both Army and Navy, so I got to know who you rooted for in the Army-Navy game.
Yeah, I always get that question, but I started in the Navy first and then found my way over into the Army and fell in love as a Green Beret, just enjoyed another 18 years of service doing that. So, I count myself amongst the Army for games like Saturday, but I would never trade my Navy experience for anything. And I learned a lot there that I probably took forward in everything I do. So I get a little bit split over it, but I'm a solid Army man.
There you go. Well, and thank you for your service to our country, both in the Navy and in the Army. Talk about that just a little bit. Talk about your service. What'd you do?
All I ever wanted to do was crawl around with guns and shoot things and jump out of planes and blow stuff up and drive fast.
So you're still a kid. You're still a kid.
I never grew up. And so that was all I was looking for. Of course, I love America. I was an Eagle Scout. I love this country, baseball, apple pie, Chevrolet, whatever. I'm all in. You cut me open, I bleed red, white, and blue. So for me, experiencing, let's say, the thrill of adventure and travel, doing it with people that were well-trained, and then you have a cause behind that really was part of the mission. It's part of what I wanted was the maximal amount of service. And I enjoyed so much of it. While also anybody in the military will tell you there's also a tremendous amount you'll complain about while in service. So it's very ironic, and I certainly wouldn't trade it for anything. And I left the Navy because, I wanted to go into special warfare. I was in the SEAL program. I had an injury, so I didn't get to complete that, and I wasn't done. My heart was still chasing this mistress affair with the commando relationship, and so I had to go to the Army to find it, and it was a great time.
Great. Well, for our listeners and our viewers that maybe don't know who Concerned Veterans for America is, share a little bit about what you work on, maybe how the organization came to be, and some of your top priorities.
We realized that veterans had a unique perspective on things that end up shaping the lives of Americans in general, not just veterans, but family members, constituents, community members. But because of our unique service and some of the things we've seen overseas and watched apply to us, we felt there was a voice. And this starts a while back. And you mentioned the Phoenix VA scandal, where we started to see how the system can, if not held accountable, fail people at the lowest level. When you're trying to service veterans who are coming in for healthcare, it really took folks like Concerned Veterans for America standing up to identify what were the problems, where the gaps were, and more importantly, well, how do we solve for those problems? And we realized that it was a very powerful thing to stand up with other veterans, family members of veterans in the community, and get people interested in how do we be. Well, I think what the founders really saw, which is how do you become a participant in your government? And the answer is not easy. So CVA, Concerned Veterans for America, is a really tight vehicle to be able to take people who are interested in their communities for America and apply that with folks that have a mission, a focus, and the discipline and training that comes out of the military. That's a broad answer of who we are, but it definitely is why I was attracted.
Yeah. And you're partners with Veterans of Foreign Wars and American Legion and many of these service groups. You just have sort of a different role, I think, that you fill and play, but you partner with them all the time, right?
Well, partnership is maybe a strong word in this community for veteran service organizations. Mm-hmm. I think what you end up with is more collaboration, also opposition. In all the different veteran service organizations, you'll find areas of their strengths or areas where you might disagree with them. And so each different veteran service organization tends to tackle different issues based on their constituency. What makes CVA unique, the Concerned Veterans for America, is number one, that broad appeal. It's for America. So this is not just about veterans. This is about the Constitution, our liberties, being able to experience the freedoms as an American citizen. So we think that means veterans leadership in that dialogue is more broad, whereas Veterans of Foreign Wars, very tight and focused on things that affect combat veterans from the foreign wars. American Legion has its own ethos, its own heart, things like patriotism or, American baseball leagues. They have a whole different program there. And then you've got disabled American veterans, the DAV, where they focus very tightly on benefits for those service members with high connected rates of disability. So everyone has their place to play. CVA is one of the great places where if you love this country, if your zeal or passion is about America and not just specific veterans issues, we like to think there's a home here to express those ideas.
And one of the things that I think one of the most important words, they're all important words in the title, but a delineator is the word for. You're Concerned Veterans for America, not Concerned Veterans of America, Concerned Veterans for America. And I think that speaks to that a little bit, right? I mean, your pitch is about all things, whether it's the budget being a national security issue, yes, or any of these things, because it's veterans who are concerned about their country and about America.
Well, you've nailed it and said it so well. And I like to think that keeps in the tradition of the West. We talk about our military as a unique perspective, but it's tied to the community. It's tied to families. It's tied to the Constitution, our election process. And so all of these issues affect us, even if we're in service, in uniform, deployed downrange. Everything that happens on the home front is why we fight on the forefront for this. And so it's been said better in history, but we're not the capable, service-oriented force that we are if we do not serve a society that is greater than that. So that makes us a unique, again, veteran service type of organization in the landscape. And that's the reason I'm here.
So you served for 22 years, I think, in the military. What were the holidays? Talk about that at this Christmas time. My wife was an Army brat. My dad was a Navy veteran. But talk about being in the military at the holidays. What's that like for you as a service member, but also for your families?
What a great question. I only realize as you ask it, there are two different answers. And one is kind of in the peacetime military, so pre 9/11, where holidays are great. You come off of leave and you typically spend time with families. You can reconnect with old friends, and it's food and festivities. And so you really get a hyper sort of excitement about those memorializations. Post 9/11, it's a new world. And now holidays are different. I remember being on missions Christmas Eve and places like New Year's or other birthdays in the family. And these are much more emotionally dark. You have a lot that's missing in your life. You're encountering, at least I did, the battlefield dynamics, which is it's a lot high drama. It's very high stakes, and you never know if you're going to make it. I remember one Christmas being on the phone with my wife, and you have these normal human relationships. We were having some challenges for different reasons, and so you leave the phone call not feeling so good, and you're maybe a little bit mad. And next thing you know, you got to turn that off and get on the helicopter and hit a target 2 hours later with 32 Rangers or something. And, it's a mix of emotion. And there's other places where I just remember thinking, I might not make it back tonight. And so all those things, you think of your family back home in celebratory mode, where of course they're not, they're also not grieving their husband or wife, but they're missing them. And so there's a deeper sense of despondency in those. And the more you do that, the easier it is to be a little bit calloused and you get a little bit hurt over time. You have to defend your heart from that. So it's one of the things we have to care for is those invisible wounds of the warriors who come home seeking vice or connection because they've lost so much in those extended deployments. It's why we ought to be very careful when we're deploying the military, because those who do must know the consequence and the cost of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you to you for those years that you did that. But I think, I think of that often, right, particularly around the holidays, just all of the men and women who serve us. And, even the ones who are home, they're with their families, they're still serving us. But man, there are so many that are, out on a ship somewhere, or, hanging out in the DMZ over in Korea. I mean, they are just away from their family. They're giving that for their country, and they deserve our thanks because, we couldn't have Christmas. We couldn't celebrate holidays or even have the abundance that we have if it wasn't for their sacrifice being out there. So this is a good moment to remember that as well.
Yeah, appreciate you reminding us all of that, because those are heavy tasks, and I think we all take them on with volunteerism in the heart, but nothing can paint over the lack or the missing component. No meal can be served that will make up for the missing family that's not there. And so, and the kids feel that they want their moms, they want their dads home with them. And so, we should always be cognizant of those.
Yeah. Nothing gets me like the videos of those dads that come home for holidays and they surprise their kids, and their kids come tearing, across this school auditorium or whatever. I love those.
That's a great moment.
Yeah, they sure are. So this year was the 10th anniversary of the Phoenix VA scandal. We did an episode about that on the show, but what did CVA do to remember that event?
So we took to the Hill with voices of veterans who were part of that scandal, including Brandon Coleman, who was a whistleblower at the time and identified some of the problems that became nationalized. And we were able to talk with our legislators and really, through bringing folks in from the field to Capitol Hill, remind lawmakers that this was a moment of inflection, as they say, where we either had to make a change or we were going to be dealing with incapacitated bureaucracies across the field. And the change was not going to be easy. And so we wanted to remind lawmakers and citizens and constituents alike that although that's the start, this is a story of past, present, and future. The start of this was, how do we change for the better? The answer was in passing the Mission Act, as you said, which is really the word mission was about maintaining the internal operating systems while also, keeping what they had good. So we did that. It was passed. It was bipartisan. It was phenomenal. I got a chance to serve in the administration of the VA, and we were responsible for implementing all the different pieces of the Mission Act. Well, Where we are now in the present is they've continued to mismanage to certain degrees aspects that were mandated by law, which at the end of the day, it means veterans have to struggle to get to their care. Not all veterans, but some veterans. And we wanted to ensure that all veterans across the board would have the maximal choice so that their care was first, not the bureaucracy of the VA. That's where we are presently. And the future is we still have work to do to fix it. So 10 years ago, scandal highlighted, created a change. The change took place to a certain degree and then stalled. It's like as soon as you take your foot off the gas, if you're up on let's say you're going up a hill with a car and you go into neutral, you're going back downhill. Well, we've been sliding kind of back downhill for some time now. And now it's time to re-energize and focus back on the future.
Yeah. Well, and, President Trump in his first term signed the Mission Act, right? And he really focused on that accountability in the VA and came to a head, really, right? Firing the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. I mean, to him, that really was something that he really focused on. And I think I would hope we're going to see that again in a new Trump administration, this sort of continued commitment to making sure that we don't let bureaucrats decide. I mean, what I love about CVA's position on this is that that healthcare ought to be in the hands of veterans. They ought to be the ones making the decisions. It shouldn't be some bureaucrat somewhere at a hospital or somebody in Washington, D.C. making the decision. It should be a veteran. If they want to go to the VA system because they like the care they get, they should be able to do that. And if they don't and they want to go get community care, they should be able to get to do that. So, I mean, I'm sure that the future looks a little bit bright, hopefully, for that accountability.
I think the good news for all of the audience listening is that these are really complex tasks that take a long time. CVA presents, I think, an idea in the back of your mind that while the world is turning on and people aren't always focused on veterans' health care, for example, there are people that are. And you have to be constantly applying against the bureaucracy in accountability, transformation, innovation, regulation. All those things are constant needs. If we could, and there are some ways that we believe this is more viable than not, if we could stroke the pen on the bill that said, make it all better in one fix, we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But the problem is, the government's very good, has inertia, the big state machine moves on, it grows, bureaucrats are entrenched. They're not malicious for the most part. You can find maliciousness in the system, but by and large, these are great people that are hoping to serve the veterans. The problem is they see it through a filter of how does this serve VA, right? They're not saying it as a way of responding negatively to the veteran, but it's really about responding positively to the VA. What we're trying to say at CVA is no, everything should first and foremost focus on the veteran. That veteran is the driver. That's in the driver's seat, not the passenger, but the driver. And to do that means you have to take power away from the bureaucrats. Mm-hmm. And when you want to talk about a war in DC, a rhetorical war, a legislative war, you threaten the power that the bureaucrats hold in those agencies, and you're at war. So we've been at war rhetorically for a long time. And at the end of this war, we see the positive idea that with particular changes in the law, the veteran will no longer have to go back through the VA to find their care. They can do it on their own and resource it on the environment. It's the 21st century. So we've got AI, we've got computers, we have healthcare clinics all around us that would be viable support options for a lot of the needs that veterans have. But we have to take out of the way this idea of controlled state healthcare. That's the key. It's not to reduce it or remove it. It's just to allow it to be diluted through more options so that the veteran can then say, I love my VA, I'm sticking with it. Or I like my VA, but it's 45 minutes away, so let me hit a clinic that's 10, right? That's all we're asking for.
Well, and it's really no different. I've made this comparison many times to the fight on, education savings accounts or school choice. Like, just allow. The whole dynamic changes when you put the focus on the consumer of the product, whether it's healthcare or education, right? When you focus on kids and parents, all education is going to get better, all of it. whether it's public, private, it's all going to get better because they have to focus on delivering a product that the consumer likes. And the same thing is true with healthcare, right? I mean, and it's true within a VA system or outside. If you just have, look at Medicare. Now, since Medicare Advantage has come along, I think, Medicare has to be better because it's competing with Medicare Advantage. So I think that's really the key here is we want the veteran to have that option and that opportunity to make the choice that is best for them. And you know better than me, so many veterans love the VA system, and that's great. Nobody wants to take that away from them. But boy, there are lots of veterans who would love to just go get community care, and they just can't right now because of the bureaucracy.
You said some very profound things there that in my mind come down to really principles. What is the principle at work here? And the principle we're talking about and discussing is the principle of, as you said, the consumer-driven or consumer-focused marketplace. And that it implies that there is a marketplace. The marketplace is different than a monopoly. And so for those who really like VA and care about VA, what they ought to see is how these bills or these efforts for the principles will actually strengthen the whole so that VA will become healthier when they're in a natural competitive mode, because they're going to want to compete for the service or for the, let's call it the pleasure of serving our veterans. Meanwhile, a doctor down the street is also in competition for that veteran. So what we would say is, if you really want the veteran to do the best they can, allow for the veteran to be in the sort of, let's call it the primary seat. We need to induce him, persuade that veteran into our system. And you're going to persuade veterans when you deliver quality care timely over and over again. That's the win here.
Yeah. Well, look, the free market works is very simple. The free market's amazing at sorting out good from bad, right? And you see that in products all the time, whether it's a cell phone. The reason iPhones and Android phones survived versus, BlackBerries or, other phones that tried to hit the market is people liked them. They were the best phones on the market, and the market reacted to that, as opposed to the government simply saying, oh, well, by the way, you all need to use an Android phone or you all need to use an Apple. That's just never going to be the right way to adopt something. And so we're seeing that in healthcare. But I wanted to ask you about, obviously the veterans' health care is a big issue and not just the Mission Act, but talk about some of the other legislation that CVA has worked on to help veterans get the care that they need.
Right. It gets complex. It's like reading, U.S. code and legislation. And so over the last year, we've had a lot of success in wrangling language down for things like what's on the books now for Elizabeth Dole, Healthcare Freedom in the 21st Century Act, which between a lot of different groups and parties and stakeholders, each different section will tackle a different cause within the VA system. And one of the strong things that CVA did was apply its efforts, its labors, all of our mental acumen against ensuring that some of that language did not erode further the benefits that redound to the market principle, as you said, for the veteran. Now, the trick there, Jeff, is that part of this is psychological. Veterans love, and constituents in general love the idea of safety in the commonplace. So oftentimes the proposed solution by government at large seems and feels the most reasonable. It's there, it's for everybody, it's a common solution. The problem is, if you let that go, you end up with less viable options. So Elizabeth Dole Act that was looking like it was going to be challenging for some of the Mission Act stuff. We were able to fight some language there and make sure that this is not a loss for veterans. I'd call that a great defense. On the other side, we have acts that are ready to go, or bills that are ready to go, that will do little things. It's like on a football game. You can defend from your opponent's getting a touchdown. You can score a touchdown, or you can make specialty plays. Some of these bills are specialty plays. We'll handle a little bit here or there around the edges inside, like the True Choice Act, which is a Stubbe bill, I believe. And that would allow for veterans in priority groups 1 through 3 to access TRICARE, which is a really good system the DOD, the active duty military folks use, and they love it. So that's a nice little fix, but it's more of a narrow specialty play. Then you have these big plays that are coming down the pike, like Complete the Mission Act. Complete the Mission Act is a broader a larger sweeping play to actually do what would be an offensive touchdown, right? We would get codes that were standardized inside the bill that says, look, Mission Act said if you're a veteran and you need health care, if you meet this, or this, you can get it through the community. But those standards have not been applied well. So what Complete the Mission would do is reinforce that inside the law. And then it would also allow for pilot studies to do unique things, innovative things that we can test inside the VA, so that 2 years down the road after the testing, we could look at the success or failures of those programs and expand those for all veterans. There's other things in there too. It's about transparency. How do we know the VA is telling the truth? Because part of the wait list scandal was the way they calculated numbers and time. And they have a whole lot of systems that let them do math in a way that is not, let's call it street math. This is bureaucratic math. So if you're truly waiting 45 days to get healthcare, they'll have ways that they've engineered that look like 15 or 16 days to a congressman. So what we've done in Complete the Mission is say, no, you got to clean that up in how you're reporting these metrics. Finally, so that's Complete the Mission. That's a great act for like an offensive play. But then we've got a really big sweeping play in mind with Marsha Blackburn's Healthcare Freedom Act, which is a larger instantiation of veterans' choice across the board. That'd be the equivalent of scoring 6 touchdowns in a quarter, because it puts forth inside the Healthcare Freedom Act all of the things that we believe would make the VA a much more competitive environment and service the veteran better. But it does something bigger than that, which is takes the barriers away from individuals who are trying to achieve their health care. Instead of going through the system or centralized bureaucracy or schedulers, you can do it from the comfort of your home. You can choose wherever you go for healthcare. And we think it's worth asking that question to every veteran. Is it worth having the choice, or do you believe that the centralized federal government should be the one to tell you where to go to get your healthcare? And we just think that when you ask that question, you're going to get a simple answer.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And we've had Senator Blackburn on the show, on this podcast this past year, to talk about this bill. And that is where we want to be, right? That's essentially choice for all veterans to decide for themselves what they want. And that's what it's all about. And then you mentioned Chairman Boss's bill, the Complete the Mission Act. And as I understand it, Darren Selnick, CVA's Darren Selnick, was part of the team who kind of drafted this legislation. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know Darren Selnick, I like to refer to him as the Chat GPT of the VA. You can kind of type in anything and he'll spit out a response that's like line and code, and the guy's phenomenal. And so he's been in the system for a long time. He was advisors, different administrations. And I will tell you, from my optic, again, I served in the VA when we were implementing the Mission Act. Darren Selnick personally walked the building and used the force of will and wit and acumen to ensure that the offices below the level of the secretary were actually adhering to what the law said. And I will just say it wasn't going to get done otherwise. So he took a lot of his personal energies to apply that. He is well suited to identify the causes, look for ways to make the fix. But then the hardest thing, and a lot of people I think take for granted law. Oh, the law was written, so everything changed. Or now that we've got the law, we've won. Not even close. The difference is once the law hits the agency, it's like handing it over to 1,000 lawyers. They're going to reinterpret it. They're going to come up with different policies. They're going to have internal directives. And so if you don't have people that are skilled and have the knowledge and the passion to babysit all of the people at the different levels who pervert or reinterpret the law in their own ways for their own reasons, you end up with where we are now, which is really good law that isn't affecting the veteran in a positive way. So that's where Darren not only came back around to help Chairman Boss in the legislation, but in my estimation is one of the most important figures in these discussions.
Yeah. Well, he has been instrumental in sort of pushing this through. And you talked about the VA, they're going to fight, the bureaucracy will fight these sorts of changes the same way that perhaps local school boards fight school choice at times, or the Department of Education fights that. they want to hold on to power. And so they're going to definitely fight. So it's going to be up to members of Congress and hopefully the Trump administration, Secretary of the VA, and Darren Selnick and others, and CVA to fight back and push back on that so that we're fighting up and standing up for the veterans, not for the bureaucrats within VA. And I would say, we had Marsha Blackburn on. We've never had Chairman Bost on, but you know what? The new host of this podcast is David Fromm. David Fromm's from Illinois. Chairman Bost is from Illinois. I would think that he would make an invite. Wouldn't you think? I would hope so.
He would make a great guest. I know the last CVA director was able to sit down with him at one of our field events and had some great on-camera discussions. He's been a great supporter, and he would be a great voice in this conversation. But you're absolutely right. The idea that CVA, you asked in the beginning who we are, Concerned Veterans for America, even when these bills and laws have been passed, we have this responsibility as stakeholders to ensure they get from passed and all the way down to implementation. Implementation happens in the field, over 2,500 brick and mortar positions out there. And so it's not easy to do. But that's one of the reasons why a group like this exists. It's not just veterans healthcare. You mentioned education. There's energy. There's things that are tied to our national security that veterans have a great voice in, because we can talk through the foreign policy discussions as it relates to how are we deploying our service members, and then what is the real gain for the American constituent. So across the board, these are great conversations to have. And if the stakeholders are not pressing these conversations into the administration, well, you said it, the admins get, they're bureaucratic, they have inertia. Nobody likes change anyways. I don't like change. And if you came into my house and wanted to redo how we were doing everything, we'd fight it. And so it's a natural cause. And so you have to have these adjutants that are not malicious, but agitating for growth. And it's no different than going to the gym. You get no growth if you don't get pain. There's going to be pain with change. Right. So,
well, what's as 2024, we talked about some of the great things that CVA did in 2024. As you look forward to 2025, this will be my last question. What's something you're looking forward to in 2025?
I am excited because these bills that we just discussed, from the specialty plays to the big 6 touchdown Marsha Blackburn play, they're all on the table for potential passage, which will relieve a lot of burden for veterans who are just struggling. I've struggled myself in the VA with a hour-away facility that has a very difficult time scheduling things and getting some of my needs taken care of. So I fortunately have CVA as another option for me. So I always seek my healthcare from the easiest solution. Well, that's on the books for 2025, whether it's in Complete the Mission or Marsha Blackburn's Healthcare Freedom Act. There's other little acts that will redound to the success of veterans. That's very exciting. But what's also exciting, Jeff, is that some of the folks that are looking at leadership inside that building are aware of what's happened in the past. They recognize the mismanagement we've seen in the let's call it the present perfect, if you will, and they know that something different has to be done. So it's about transformation. It's about accountability and transparency. And I think, to me, if we get anywhere close to that, because of the knowledge and the work that CVA has done, others as well, the CVA has been very unique in how to look across those 3 things, accountability, transformation, and innovation. If we can look across those and find successes in the next year, veterans are going to find that the 21st century healthcare can work for them.
Jason, thanks for joining us. Appreciate all you did yourself personally and CVA, and just want to thank you for joining us today.
I really appreciate you having us and having me, and what a great discussion leading into Christmas. I think we're going to have a great New Year's ahead, and excited to see where we go next.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Well, look, this is a great example of free market principles at work. We talk about them all the time on this podcast, and it's no different here with the Veterans Administration and Concerned Veterans for America, doing great work trying to keep the pressure on. And I will just say this, as we go into 2025 and this new Trump administration, President Trump and his administration will have an opportunity to work with Congress and to really revolutionize and change the delivery of health care for veterans and the VA itself. And, it's going to be exciting to watch that. And I know that Concerned Veterans for America is going to be a big part of that as well. Well, look, the American Potential Podcast always working on stories to help keep you inspired and informed. Now, the best way to stay connected is by liking and subscribing to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just keep in mind, as I always say, liberty and freedom, they're easily taken for granted. Don't take liberty and freedom for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.